Hi, Rachel Sanders. Welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. You're doing some really exciting things in the wellness space, so I'm excited to hear about that. And also lessons learned along the way. You are very successful, but like all of us, we've had all the failures along the way as well. So we can help my audience out by learning from the failures that you overcame and how you actually became successful. So just to start, can you just give us like a brief overview of your journey and who you are?
Yeah, happy to. So today I'm CEO and founder of Routine. I'm also a digital creator with an audience of 109,000 across social and have a newsletter. In addition, I am a mom of two. So I've got a lot going on in my life. But in terms of how I got here, it really starts back at an earlier age. So I grew up in a household where holistic health was really part of my everyday life. It became ingrained in me that what I was doing across my nutrition, across my lifestyle, supplementation, movement, all really mattered when it came to my health, both from preventing illness, but also if I did get sick, there were all sorts of holistic ways to help my body heal itself without going the traditional medicine route. And I didn't know how different that was until kind of sitting here 6, 7 years ago. But early in my career, I was really struggling with my health. I was dealing with burnout and stress and wasn't sleeping a lot. I was working in finance. So a lot of hours, a lot of FaceTime, a lot of stress. And I went back to the supplement aisle. And at that point, it was just overwhelming. So I didn't have the support of my mom or my parents to really help me navigate it. I was on my own in my 20s and felt this overwhelm. Like, what do I actually need? What do I take? How am I going to actually figure this out by myself? And that's something that I feel like so many people experience when they're like, okay, I need to improve my health and I want to go this holistic route. I want to find natural solutions, but where do I start? And at the same time, I was seeing all of this innovation in technology and data science on the healthcare side of things. So in like diabetes management companies or acute care companies, and it was really making a difference in patient care. And I said, why aren't we taking all of this technology advancement and moving it to the holistic health side, or at least introducing it to holistic health to take a much more data driven, science backed approach to really help people figure out what they need and give them products that are truly based on science that are going to make a difference in their lives. And that's really what we do at Routine, where we are on a mission to create smarter health solutions for your most vibrant health, starting with our really effective science-backed supplement line.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's a really good concept, and yeah, it is a really big space as well. And you've secured $11 million in funding. So I'm just wondering, like that's one of the hardest things really in the startup space to secure funding. So how did you go about that, and what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when securing that funding, and how did you overcome early rejections or failures in the process?
Yeah, it's very hard to fundraise, especially as a female founder. So if there's any females out there listening, I hear you. We get less than 3% of VC dollars. So it's incredibly hard, especially for women. But in terms of the lessons I learned, I mean, I've raised a good amount of money and across a number of rounds, and I've definitely learned how to improve the process. We started, just to give you some context, we started with a friends and family round. Then we raised a seed. Then we raised a Series A. And so that's really how the funding came about. I would say the lesson across all of those rounds is really have a strict process. So one of the things I didn't do very well early on, but I got better at as time went on, is really creating a tight process around raising the money. And when I say tight process, I mean I'm very prepared up front before I go out or have any conversation. All of my conversations are batched into a really short period of time. So I'm creating that momentum and that FOMO that's really critical when you're looking to raise capital. And then also having a really strict process around your CRM. So how often are you looking at it? What are you updating? Being very strategic and well written around your notes and your updates so that you know who you're talking to, when you talk to them, what the status is, when they said that they're going to be at investor committee, et cetera. And that takes some time, but it's so worth it when you go back in a couple of days and you've talked to 20 funds, you know exactly what the history was with those conversations. And all of that helps you get to a point where you get to a yes faster.
Yeah, and I guess those same principles would apply to sales as well if you're doing
Yeah,
sales.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's very similar to sales. The rounds change and the amounts change, but having that really strict process is something I would recommend from the beginning, even if it's friends and family and it's your old colleagues. Making sure you get those reps in will just help you as you go further in your journey.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. But just going back a bit, can you tell us about maybe the worst experience you had when trying to get funding? Let's say, like maybe a meeting you had or something that totally flopped. Can you tell us a story around that?
I've got a lot of them. A couple of my horror stories, I would say. So I was talking to a fund. I actually forget which round this was, but I remember they had the meetings super late at night, like 10, 11 p.m. my
Is this
time.
online or in
Yeah,
person?
they were
Okay.
online.
Yeah.
Because I did a lot of fundraising through my first round was pre-pandemic, and then I did a lot of raising through the pandemic, and so fundraising just went
Right.
online.
Of course.
But so this was online, and our first meeting was at like 10 or 11 p.m., and I was like, I don't work that late. Like, I'm a wellness founder. Like, we talk about managing our stress and making sure we
Yeah.
have a sleep
Yeah.
routine. So getting on the phone, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, if that's when they're available, that's when they're available. Looking back, I'm sure it was a test. And then we had a couple more calls all late, and then they just totally ghosted. And that happens a lot. Like, the ghosting really happens. And I was like, you had me completely out of my routine, and you didn't even have the courtesy to say no. But like that happens, right? Like, I think it's a lot easier for VCs to just not respond than to say no or give a reason, because a lot of founders, I'm not one of these founders, but a lot of founders will push back or say hurtful things or things like that. And so the ghosting thing is definitely reality. And I will say another piece of advice is like, kind of like dating, when you know, like, when you know, like, if someone is pursuing you,
Yeah.
they're doing, you can tell when they're doing the work, they're looking at your deck, they're scheduling follow-ups, they're giving updates. That's when they're doing work. If someone, you have a call with them and it's crickets, like, that's a pass. Even
Mm.
if they haven't said a pass yet, like, that's a pass. There's 100 ways that VCs will say no without actually saying no.
Mm. And they probably go through a lot of founders as well, and
Mm-hmm.
they might be a bit overwhelmed themselves, I guess, in some cases. Yeah, no, it's interesting, and yeah, same thing applies to sales as well. You get a lot of ghosting happening. That's what I found as well, which is really annoying. But you got to think like from the other side. I mean, I think it is a bit rude personally, but from the other side of things, like I have ghosted people as well. Like people like constantly like, I'm going to do YouTube SEO for you, and you get so much in the end, you just
Yeah,
don't answer it. You know
exactly.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that fundraising isn't personal. And I've gotten, I don't know, 400, 500 no's in the journey of this. Like, you're going to get a lot of no's. It's all a numbers game. And you really want to find the people that you want to work with. And so making sure you're interviewing them at the same time, you're background checking them, you're asking people who have worked with them what their experience is like, and you're really thinking strategically about the partners where you're going to be taking money, because the last thing you want to do is take money from people that you end up not wanting to work with. I mean, it's very hard to get
Yeah.
somebody out of the business, and so you have to be really careful upfront about who you say yes to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was going to bring that up as well. But even though, like, female founders, I think the statistics are even less than 4% of investment goes to them. So it's really hard to get. But at the same time, you've got to be, like you said, really careful with who you actually choose. And I guess some people could be a bit like, oh, if someone says yes, finally, then, if you don't check them out properly and if
Yeah.
they're not the right fit for you, it could be a bit more of a
Yeah.
disaster further down the line. But you must, I mean, have a lot of resilience, and like 400 or 500 rejections. I mean, that seems to be what it takes, is it? I mean, you must be a very resilient person and,
That's
and
a
be able to handle those rejections. A lot of people
it's
can't.
It's across a lot of rounds, and I've learned to handle it. And I've also learned there's a couple of things that I did differently between my seed and my Series A that I will take with me going forward. And it's one, fundraising is not personal, even though it feels personal, because you're often solving, especially in health and wellness, a personal problem, which is the same for me here. And there's 1,000 reasons somebody would say no. One, they just don't like the problem that you're solving. They don't resonate with it. They don't want to be working on it for 10 years. They don't want to be listening to it, hearing about it for 10 years. They could be fundraising themselves and not actually able to say that. Or maybe they have only a little bit of dry powder left, and there's very specific kind of thesis or very specific companies that they can say yes to, but they wanted to take the meeting because it was a warm intro from somebody else. The list goes on and on and on. The moral of the story is it's not necessarily about you. It could be you as a founder. They don't believe in you as a founder. That happened to me early on. But for the most part, it's not you. And even if it is, find the people who do believe in you, because you don't want to work with people who don't believe in you. So it can be hard, but like having that mindset is really helpful. And then the other thing that was really helpful is figuring out a way to learn from the process. So what are some of the questions that you have about your own business that you are trying to validate? You can think of, especially if it's consumer or even in B2B. I mean, these VCs that you're talking to have tons of experience in the market. They've seen hundreds of portfolio companies, or like hundreds of companies at least. Yeah. And so they have some sort of pulse and understanding of what's working, what's not. How can you use this time to get some of that knowledge from them? What are the questions you want to ask? Like, what's the messaging that you want to test? Like, sometimes I'll even go into it early on in the fundraising process, and I'll have 4 calls in a day, and I'll say the story slightly differently on all 4 and like see how it lands and just start to learn. And so it's more of a testing, learning experience that can help you be a better founder, help you improve your business, versus you showing up and being like, please, please, please give me money. Because it's really, you're giving them the opportunity to invest in your vision and invest in your dream. I mean, ultimately, everybody here wants to make money, and you're giving these people an opportunity to have a seat at the table to grow with you and to make that money from your hard work and your vision.
Yeah, and I think if you come across with that confidence as well, like, you're interviewing them as well, then that can make a better impression on them, I think, than, like you said, just like, oh, please, please, I need the money, I'm desperate, Same with sales as well. So you must have quite a team at the moment. Like, how many people are working on your startup?
We actually have a fairly small team at the moment. Okay. We're 7 total, some part-time, some full-time, and then we have some contractors as well.
Okay. And what's a key hiring mistake you made earlier on, and how did you pivot to build, a bit of a stronger team at Routine?
Yeah, hiring's hard. Hiring and people management is really hard, I would say. A couple of mistakes that I made, and this is less like team members and more just overall people. So if it's advisors or consultants or people that you're just bringing on, so put team as everybody that could be working with you on your journey. I was not as confident in my ability to execute early on because I was a new founder. I had done one startup in the past for a very short period of time, but historically my background was in finance. I had come out of business school. I knew a lot of theories, but I hadn't operated a lot. And so I wanted to surround myself with people who I felt like had more experience, but ultimately, like, my gut, my intuition, and my ability to execute, even though I hadn't had the experience before, was so much better than these people who had like done it before. And so you really need to be cautious about who you're surrounding yourself with around the table and who you're listening to over your own gut. I mean, you're building something new, it's innovative, you're the one with the vision. Being able to be confident in executing on that is really important. And then I would say another mistake that we made, and it's less than hiring, it's more around firing, where I definitely did not move on from people that weren't working out fast enough. And that created a number of issues across the team, across the company. And so you hear it time and time again. I hear it time and time again, but you really need to, once you notice someone isn't working in a startup with a small team, you have to make that hard choice and pivot to a stronger team.
Yeah, look, I've experienced both of those. Have you ever heard of the expression mentor whiplash?
Oh my gosh, all the time. And I dealt with it. I dealt with it a lot. And when I'm giving advice now, I try to say, I try to like preface it with this is coming from my experience given my context,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't have all of the context that's in your head right now. So
Yeah.
take with it what you want and throw away what you don't, because it may or may not apply in the current situation you're dealing with.
Exactly. And the whole context of this podcast is not to really ask people for advice, but just talk about their failures, what they learned from them, and then some people will resonate with that. So,
Exactly.
I had the same thing. Mentors like, do this, you should do that. In the end, my head was just exploding. And it's like you said, it's your own intuition, or you call it gut intuition, same thing, that you really need to follow. And that it comes from your experience, from, wherever. And then that's usually always the right, or always is the right decision. And also I had the same issue with firing. We used to call our team like a family, and that's a mistake. It's great to you treat them like a family, you treat them really good, but like you're never going to fire your daughter or your wife or
Yeah.
whatever, unless it's like a divorce. So, a team and a great culture, but we did keep on people for way too long, and then that drains, your runway becomes much shorter. And so if I was to do another startup now, the same thing, as soon as something isn't going well, say no,
Yeah.
we have to get rid of them.
And it's really hard. Like when you're sitting there, like I've had to make some really hard choices where people that I loved working with, I could just were not what the company needed at that time. And a lot of
Yeah.
times too, like someone will be really effective for a season, and then all of a sudden the market changes, the company changes, there's new products, you pivot your marketing, you change something about the business, and despite the fact that they've been extremely effective, it might not be the answer for the time going forward. And that's really hard as a leader, especially people who are empathetic and want to please people and don't want to upset people. It can be a really tough call, but it's so critical. And every single time that's happened, I felt so much better afterwards. And the company has, and stuff has come out of the woodwork from the team on like, it just like it reinforces that decision time and time again, but it's just so hard to get to that point. And so if you're in that, I see you, I hear you, just do it anyways.
Yeah, it's a hard decision, but in a way, you're sort of saving your own company, your own startup. I remember we had, just pre-COVID, we had a sales guy who was a lovely guy, beautiful man, Thomas, and he was very good. And he was getting some traction, and then COVID hit, and he was like, he would just go in person everywhere. Once COVID hit, he just couldn't do digital, or he couldn't do sales online. But we kept him for 2 years, and that was a mistake. And like all these things have drained all the runway, all the finances. So yeah, that's really interesting. Now you have you've balanced, you're running a business, like you said, you're trying to balance your personal life. You're in the well-being space itself. So what were some moments when you felt like you failed at maintaining that balance, and how did you recover?
This morning, I
Okay.
no, I mean, I feel like I often will know better and do it anyways, and then it feels like, you knew better, you shouldn't have done it. But I would say one of the things that I have started doing is really focusing on stress management and balancing my cortisol levels. There's 100 reasons why, but especially women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, which I am, cortisol is at its peak imbalance. It creates all sorts of problems, from weight loss issues to trouble sleeping at night to other hormone imbalances. And it's really hard to show up as a good parent, as a good leader, as someone who's sharing wellness tips online if I don't feel my best. And so I'm really, especially over the past 2 years, have been focusing on my cortisol and overall health and wellness even more than I did before. And one of the key things there is being very cognizant about my phone use and my email.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said this morning is when I felt like a failure, one of my biggest learnings is to not look at my email before I get my kids out the door, before I actually sit down to work, and really before I push something else that I know needs to get done forward. So maybe it's a strategic plan, maybe it's a pitch deck, maybe it's thinking through how we're going to plan marketing for the quarter, but actually sitting there and moving something forward and then going into email, because 9 times out of 10, especially as a founder, there's going to be something that sets you off in that, whether it's an annoying email, whether it's a fire drill,
Yeah.
whether it's like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. But then you just start spiraling, right? And it's so hard to focus and be present with your kids if you're a parent, or be present with your partner, or get the work done that you need to
Yeah.
get done, or be able to like set up the day for success. And this morning I broke my cardinal rule. I was dealing with something pretty frustrating yesterday, and I knew that I was going to have an email in my inbox, and I was just like, oh, I want to know I want to know what it is. And I opened my inbox, and there it was. And then my concentration completely left from making my daughter breakfast and getting her out the door and all the things that I needed to get done today to that email and like all the like windfall from it. And I was like, oh, you know better. Why did you do that? But I'm human. And so that's one of those small failures that happen.
Yeah, as long as you learn from it,
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, and plus, we all like sometimes I'll get onto YouTube or something and just get distracted by just stupid
I
stuff.
know.
I never get onto TikTok because I don't know, even like shorts and that, like constantly one after the other. You can feel like you can be there for like an hour or two, and it's like, what have I done? Nothing, and you don't even feel
Exactly.
good after it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's really really interesting, and obviously, be ironic if you're in the wellness space and you're not looking after your wellness. I guess no, that would
Yeah,
be
exactly.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people, it's the case, but I really try to practice what I preach, and I'm constantly
mm,
learning as we launch new products and as we launch various kind of, whether it's educational content or I'm currently doing some courses and learning further deep into hormone health. So I'm trying to constantly add in extra things into my wellness
hmm
and share what actually works as a working mom, as a founder who is trying to focus on her health and well-being.
yeah. Because in the startup space, I think it's more males than females, but there's this thing like you've got to work 24/7, 7 days a week, and the ones that do that, they often get burnt out. I mean, you can have sprints where you need to do a lot, and if you're really enjoying what you're doing, it's great. But you still have to have that balance. You still have to
Yeah.
have, like you said, good sleep and exercise and eat well, I guess.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of people, male and female, do that and
Yeah.
just completely burn out. And not burn out to the like, I want to lay on the couch for a day, like burn out to the, I have 4 chronic diseases and I'm in the hospital and there's no possible
Mm.
way that I'm working.
Yeah.
And I think the era of I'm going to work 24/7 is still there, but it's not as much there. And I'm fortunate to be in a space where the people that are building and investing in health and wellness are acutely aware of the damage that constant chronic stress puts on the body, that poor sleep puts on the body, that your ability to focus, your ability to solve complex problems, your ability to push things forward is so dependent on the food you're eating, on what you're like surrounding yourself with, how you're sleeping, how you're moving,
Yeah.
that it's like maybe it's insular within that category, but I don't feel guilty for working out every day because I mean, if I don't work out, I don't know what's going to happen, right? Like I'm not going to be productive. I'm not going to be able to solve those problems. And I'm probably going to be really stressed, really irritable, and I'm not going to be a great leader. So me spending 30 minutes working out is actually critical for the company versus taking anything away from it.
Yeah, and that's a really really good point. Yeah, when we had our startup, the people that work for us was 4 days. I mean, my co-founder and I, Diane, we worked more days, but I would at least have one day a week where I'm not doing anything. And at the beginning, there were late nights and everything. That's why now I don't like to do any sort of night work at all. So more balance with the family. But there is research out there that companies that employees work 4 days a week are actually as much productive or more productive sometimes than because they're happier, they're more relaxed, they're not so stressed,
Yeah.
and if employees are happy, the work output, and if you're happy, the work output, if you're less stressed, is so much better than what you do. Like 12 hours stressed might be the same as 4 hours not
Yeah.
stressed. So
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah.
really interesting. So were there any marketing or product launch failures you learned from, and how did those experiences shape your current success?
The marketing world has changed substantially since we launched. And
Absolutely.
so I would say there's a number of failures along the way, but the one that would be super applicable to today's market environment is paying attention, or the mistake was not paying as much attention to organic at the beginning as I would have liked to. And then looking back, that's the one thing that I would change in our marketing journey over everything else, is really, while building up and scaling and using funds to grow the business, also investing more into building that community around the brand sooner. And as we looked at launching our newest products, which is our functional line of powder drink mixes for sleep, stress, and focus, we really focused on that. So we dialed back most of our paid spend, and we said, all right, we are going to build a community of women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, people that are supporting those women who are experiencing the stress, the overwhelm, the burnout. And we are going to show them that we empathize with them, because I am one of them. I get it. I'm dealing with a lot of these struggles. And then we're going to build this back up organically. And that has been an instrumental success, or it has been instrumental in our success for our newest product launch. And that meant even myself becoming involved in the wellness space online, becoming a thought leader, showing up, building out my personal brand, sharing my story as a way to both showcase the brand, but also showcase the problems and what we're doing, and show that I have empathy across the board, because I'm experiencing a lot of the same problems. And that's really been helpful. Like, I've grown my audience to 109,000 in just 9 months, and we helped launch Amazon with that. We've helped launch our new products on that. And we're just continuing to invest further in that beyond me. So other members of our team, how other like users of our product
Yeah.
are showing up online, and how we can showcase more of those stories, because people really care about people, and they care more about people than the brand.
And those followers, are they on certain platforms that you've targeted?
Yeah. So I started on Instagram. That's my main
Okay.
platform. I
Mm-hmm.
also now have a newsletter, and I'm scaling on TikTok right now. And I
Okay.
also show up on LinkedIn and X, but that's much more from a work perspective than it
Mm-hmm.
is from a community building perspective.
So building your personal brand has been just as important or more important than building your company brand, do you think? And that's sort of helped with the company brand?
Yeah, and that's a hill I will die on every single day. I mean, I will say, like, if you are a founder without a personal brand, you are going to fall behind. It is critically important to show up online, show your wins, show your failures, show the journey. You don't have to give them everything. You don't have to do full build in public. Here are my numbers every single month. But if you show up online, you're increasing your luck surface area. You are increasing the amount of consumers that you have a potential to reach, especially on Instagram and TikTok. There is so much opportunity around virality that's really launched and scaled brands completely organically. And you're the VCs, the investors that you want to be targeting, the potential customers, if you're B2B, they're all online. The more that you can show up and be human and be vulnerable and show the why behind what you're doing, the more people are rooting for you, the more surface area you have, the bigger network you have, and it's just going to increase your success. And there's literally, I've never seen a founder that's built a personal brand online that has regretted it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's very true. Even in the podcast space, I mean,
Yeah,
podcasts, doing podcasts like you're doing now, people get to know you more, personally, and
exactly.
they, yeah. I think once somebody's been exposed to like 7 hours of you or another person, they feel like they know them personally, and then if they actually met you personally, like they feel like they've known you, like a friend or something. So that's really really interesting. So, what would be one piece of business advice that you've been given that is misleading or incorrect?
There's a big debate going on online right now, actually, about this, and it's the Paul Graham's essay around founder mode versus manager mode. And I will say that the advice as you're scaling the business is to find great people, offboard your tasks, and like let them handle it. And I will say the times when I do that, the company doesn't thrive quite as much as when I'm more in founder mode. And sometimes I'm digging into the weeds and I'm in it, I'm seeing it a little bit more. And those are the times when I kind of come up with the creative ideas, or I see, all right, why are we doing it that way? There's this other way. Like, have we tried this hack, or have we tried this workaround, or, oh, this would make so much more sense that way. And just being able to have those moments is really, really critical. And so I would caution anyone, obviously, like as you scale, you have to offboard tasks, you have to delegate. And I'm admittedly not the best at delegation, but it's also really helpful for me to just like jump in the weeds occasionally in certain aspects of the business to see what's going on, because it gives you a new perspective, it gives you new ways to think about things. And so I just wouldn't totally offboard things. And this goes back a little bit too to the conversation we had at the beginning, where if you're scaling and you're hiring experts in the field, they're experts, but they're not experts at your vision and your company. And so if they're doing something where you're like, this just doesn't feel right, or like, this doesn't feel right for our business, have that conversation with them and get to the bottom, understand, ask them why. Like, why are they doing this? How are they thinking about it? Like, what's the insight here? And figure out if there's a reason you're like not understanding it, or maybe they're thinking about it differently than you do, and you have some insight in the customer or the company or the vision where you actually need to talk further and get more aligned, and there could be a better way forward.
Yeah, it's a really good point because it is your vision. But there are those, like I've heard some people in the space say, your only job as a founder is to hire amazing people and just let it go. So I don't think,
I think that's right, but if you do that, like, where does the vision go? And
yeah,
like, yes, it's your job to like execute on the vision, but if you only hire and let it fully go, I think there's a medium, there's a happy medium there. Like, the
mm,
argument here is like Steve Jobs did it, Brian Chesky um, at Airbnb did it. They work in the weeds. They're not just like
yeah.
manager, like hands off fully. There's a happy medium that I personally think works better.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that, and that's how I operate as well. I think it is your vision in the end, just to leave it totally up to somebody else. At least, if they want to do something different that doesn't feel right, like you said, let them explain that to you, and you might think, oh, okay, look, I get that now, or not.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. All right, so what's next for Rachel?
We are scaling right now. So we launched our new products and we're coming up with some new iterations on those, looking at some new flavors for 2025. And we have historically been a brand almost exclusively online. And we are still very much online, where you can find us on Amazon, on TikTok Shop, on our own D2C site. But the next couple of years are also going to be about strategic retail openings. So you're going to see us in more places across the US.
Awesome. Well, if people, want to find you, like we'll leave it in the show notes, but your website is routine.co, rootine.co. Is that right?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's our
Yeah.
company website, and we're routine_co on social. And if you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Rachel SOP Sanders, and you can also, through that link in bio, find my website, get access to my newsletter, and kind of everything else that I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for being on the show today. And there's a lot of learnings in there, and I'm sure a lot of founders, uh, female and male founders, will very much relate to what you're saying and will help them on their journey.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for having me.